Today I want to share a history bit that's going to be coming from the book, The Scatterings of Israel. I want to read a portion in here that has to do with the tribe of Dan and the Israelite dispersion among the Greeks. I've got about 4 pages of this book that I'm going to read. And I want to share this to provide us with some information about how that when Israel scattered and went to different places, that you can know that there is a trail, that there is a historical trail, there's a biblical trail, and there's evidence that helps us to confirm what the Almighty said that he was going to do if the house of Israel would break his covenant and disobey him. And this that I'm reading today is reflecting one of those trails. And so we shall begin reading. The tribe of Dan and Israelite dispersion among the Greeks. I want to read the scripture found in Devarim or Deuteronomy chapter 33, verse 22. And it says, "And to Dan he said, Dan is a lion's whelp, and shall leap out of Bashan." The above prophecy given by Moshe, by Moses. As Moses gave this prophecy in the book of Devarim, when he was prophesying regarding certain things pertaining to all of the tribes, right before they would go into the land of Canaan. So this is prophecy concerning what Dan would do before he got into the land. All right? And in this prophecy, Moshe indicates that Dan had the tendency to move around. Looking at the early history of the tribe of Dan, after they received their portion of the land, they were unable to secure it and began moving around in search of other territory. They ended up in the northeastern region of Bashan at Laish. So I pause for a moment. As Moshe prophesied, Moshe saw where Dan would end up. Dan was not given the inheritance that was located in the furthest northern part of the land of Israel. He was given a portion somewhere that was a little closer to the coast. Because he was not able to conquer those peoples that were there, they started moving. It was here in Laish that the tribe of Dan began to lead the Israelites into pagan idolatry by setting up its own priests to facilitate the idolatrous worship system, which continued until the time of the captivity. Quotation from a scripture passage we're reading here in the book of Shoftim or Judges, and it says, "And the children of Dan took what Micaiah had made and the priests that he had, and they came to Laish, to a people quiet and secure. And they smote them with the edge of the sword, and burnt the city with fire. And there was no deliverer, because the city is far from the Sidonians, and they have no intercourse with men. And it is in the valley of the house of Rahab. And they built the city and dwelt in it. And they called the name of the city Dan, after the name of Dan their father, who was born to Israel. And the name of the city was Ulumaeus before. And the children of Dan set up the graven image for themselves. And Jonathan, son of Gershon, son of Manasseh, he and his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan, till the time of the carrying away of the nation. And they set up for themselves the graven image which Micaiah made all the days that the house of Elohim was in Shiloh. And it was so in those days that there was no king in Israel. This is according to Judges, or Shoftim chapter 18, verse 27 through 31. According to the prophecy of Moshe or Moses, the tribe of Dan continued to move around. Next, we see the tribe of Dan was in partnership with Yavan, or the Ionians, the Greeks, in the business of seafaring trade. They traded their goods with Tyre and Sidon. Quote, this is from Ezekiel chapter 27, verse 19. And Dan and Yavan from Uzal entered into trade for you for your wares, wrought iron, cassia, and sweet cane were bartered for your merchandise. As a result of this partnership with Yavan, many of the tribe of Dan, notice I said many, not all, many of the tribe of Dan began to dwell among Yavan. This is among the Greeks. Since Dan was accustomed to the pagan system of religion, it was not difficult for Dan to assimilate into Greek or Hellenistic culture. Dan's coexistence with Yavan brought about the development of the Spartans and the city of Sparta. At least we believe this to be so. Also known in antiquity as the city-state of Lacedaemon. The book of Maccabees refers to the Spartans as brothers of the Judean Israelites and of the family of Abraham. Let's look at 1 Maccabees chapter 12, verses 5 through 11. Quote, and this is the copy of the letters which Jonathan wrote to the Lacedaemonians. Jonathan the high priest and the elders of the nation and the priests and the other of the Jews unto the Lacedaemonians, their brethren, send greetings. There were letters sent in times past unto Onias, the high priest, from Darius, who reigned then among you, to signify that you are our brethren, as the copy here underwritten doth specify. At which time Onias entreated the ambassador that was sent honorably and received the letters, wherein declaration was made of the league and friendship. Therefore we also, albeit we need none of these things, that we have the holy books of Scripture in our hands to comfort us, have nevertheless attempted to send unto you for the renewing of brotherhood and friendship, lest we should become strangers unto you altogether. For there is a long time past since you sent unto us. We therefore at all times without ceasing, both in our feasts and other convenient days, do remember you in the sacrifices which we offer and in our prayers, as reason is, and as it becometh us to think upon our brethren. First Maccabees 12:19 through 21. And this is the copy of the letters which Oniaris sent, Arius, king of the Lacedaemonians, to Onias, the high priest. Greetings. It is found in writing that the Lacedaemonians and Jews are brethren, and that they are of the stock of Abraham. I want to pause for a moment. Now, this that I've read here comes out of the book of First Maccabees. It's a letter that is recorded in the first book of Maccabees that was sent to the leaders. The Kohen Hagadol, the high priest, sent the letter to the king there in Sparta, and they responded as well, knowing that they're of the same tribe. They're of the house of Israel. How many of you knew that the Spartans were a part of the house of Israel? You didn't know, did you? Nope. A lot of things you don't know. That's why we share this with you. There's a lot of history here. This letter is contained in the book of Maccabees, First Maccabees. All you got to do is get it and read it. And they were writing these letters because they wanted to reestablish fellowship, but also they wanted to see if they could have support, because at this particular time when this letter was written in the book of Maccabees, it was during the period of the Maccabees fighting against the Seleucid king Antiochus. We all just finished celebrating Hanukkah, and the whole focus of Hanukkah has to do with what happened when the Seleucid king came, desecrated the temple, and how the Almighty restored the temple back into the hands of the Maccabees so that they could clean the temple and rededicate it and begin the worship unto the Almighty. But this letter right here was written during that time period. That's why we see names such as Onias there. Anyone remembers Onias? He was the high priest before Jason came in there and basically sold out the people because he wanted to become a Greek. I'll keep reading. It is evident that the tribe of Dan spearheaded the dispersal of Israelites among the Greeks. As previously noted in Ezekiel 27:19, there is evidence of the tribe of Dan being in partnership with Yavon in the seafaring trade business. Another piece of evidence in the scriptures in Yoel is in Yoel, commonly called Joel, chapter 3, verses 4 through 6. It tells us that the people of Yehuda and Jerusalem were sold to the Greeks. That's Yavon. The Hebrew, anytime you see the word Greeks in the scriptures, in the Hebrew, it is the word Yavon. That's the word used. Yavon is the person through whom the Greeks came forth. If you're familiar with the Eonians, the Eonian is a Greek term which is a transliteration of the Hebrew word Yavan. So that's something you might want to know. But in Joel chapter 3, verses 4 through 6, it tells of the people of Yehuda and Jerusalem being sold to the Greeks by Tyre and Sidon. Now, before I read this prophetic text, I do want to say something just for clarification, because for those of us who read the Septuagint, if you read the Septuagint where it notes in Ezekiel chapter 27, verse 19, one of the things that I noticed there is that it does not mention Dan and Yavan together in the Septuagint. So when you read that, you're going to find that it doesn't. All right. So for those who read, and I read the Septuagint. But one of the things that I believe that happened as when they were putting together the biblical sources, and that is because the Masoretic text of the biblical source drew from other sources that existed, in particular the Targums, and based upon history and the knowledge of what was going on during their time in history, because they had a little bit better understanding of what was happening historically. And so in Ezekiel chapter 27, it has a whole list of different nations that were trading with Tyre and Sidon. Tyre and Sidon was the merchant capital of the world during that time. So in the 27th chapter of Ezekiel, it gives a whole list of all these different nations. And then it just comes to this particular one where it mentions Dan and Yavan. So those who were living during that time, when they were writing this and putting together the information to develop the Masoretic text, they knew historically what was happening, because they knew that there were the people of Dan already in that region, and they knew that there were already Israelites from the northern regions that were already in those regions. And so that's one of the reasons why you may see that come up. And so I'm just going to leave it there. I don't want to go into a whole lot of details, because many of us may not be aware of what we call the transmission of the scriptures and things that happen in certain words and names that were put in and not put in. So I just want to mention that to you. All right. Joel chapter 3, verse 4 through 6. It gives us this evidence where we know that the Israelites indeed were dispersed among the Greeks. Quote, "And what have you to do with me, O Tyre and Sidon, and all Galilee of the Gentiles? Do you render me a recompense, or do you bear malice against me? Quickly and speedily will I return your recompense on your own heads, because you have taken my silver and my gold. You have brought my choice ornaments into your temples, and you have sold the children of Judah and the children of Jerusalem to the children of the Greeks, that you might expel them from their coasts." So here in this passage, where the Almighty is speaking through the prophet Yoel, he makes mention of an occurrence that took place, that when Judah and Jerusalem were being attacked, when they were being slaughtered by the Babylonians, and people were fleeing here and fleeing there. And there was a number of things that were taking place with many of the surrounding nations that were involved in the demise of the southern kingdom. One of those players was the Edomites. They would capture some of the Judean Israelites when they were fleeing from the Babylonians, and they would take them and bring them into slavery. They would trade them. See, Tyre and Sidon being a place where all of the merchants came, they traded everything. They traded silver, they traded gold, they traded food products. They also traded human lives. And so in the trading of those human lives, there were many people from Yehuda that were brought to Tyre and Sidon and were sold to the Greeks. And so here we have a biblical evidence that confirms the fact of how the Judean Israelites were dispersed, along with those of the tribe of Dan that were dispersed. One of the things we know about Dan we know was a traveling tribe. They pretty much kind of took off and went wherever they wanted to go. And that was a known thing about Dan. And so we share this just to provide some information regarding the fact that throughout the regions of the Greeks and throughout the regions of Southern Europe, throughout the regions of even as far as in the land of what we would commonly call today Britain, that ancient Israelites were scattered to all of these regions. So with that, the Most High be praised.